Okay, so hope you guys can see my screen.
Uh, no, Venkatesh. The sharing is stopped.
How about
Yes,
now?
I can see now.
Okay, you can see my PPT, right?
It is not the PPT. I could see the Teams only. I think it should be the other window.
Perfect.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are joining from. Thanks for joining our session 26. This is Bridging Developers and Consultants for Project Success. This is session 26. We are with Anita Ishwaran along with me on the table. So So this is our group. So you can join us from LinkedIn, YouTube, and this is our website using the QR codes. This group is supported by me along with volunteered by Umesh Pandit. And we are 1400 plus members globally and increasing. So our past sessions, you can reach out on the YouTube channel, this way user group Middle East. So these are all our past sessions. You can access them from here. And today's session is Dynamic Synergy, Bridging Developers and Consultant for Project Success. So I have got many of the consultants asking me to give a good idea, whoever is starting on the functional side or a technical side, to understand the other person's priority, how they are going to do it. So this topic was curated by the Ask, and our agenda for today is initially we have introduced the speakers, and then uh, we will explain the disconnect, why the disconnect is between the functional and technical, and what all the aspects you should cover, and risk of not involving developers in the very early stage of the projects. So we're going to do that, and better user requirements, how to clearly get user requirements from the business users and communicate it to the technical team. And we'll also give you some tools for collaborations and mindset of this is not the problem. So we're going to address that. And at the end, we're going to take Q&A, and views expressed are from the speakers and do not represent from employers or Microsoft. Contest or demo data and lab environments are used in the events. Any recommendations coming out of the session should not be applied to production environment directly, should be at least tested in a sandbox. Session will be recorded on Teams, and if you do not wish to consent the part of the team, this is the right time to disconnect. And about me, this is Venkatesh. So I manage this user group, this is for user group Middle East. So I'm hosting this from Dubai, and I have 10 plus years of experience on DX, and I'm managing this user group, and you can reach me on my LinkedIn. And I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. So along with me, Anita Ishwaran, joining us from UK, and she has 18 plus years of experience, and she's also an MVP. Uh, she's an author of the blog. She is reachable on that blog, and you can reach her on LinkedIn. And for newsletters, you can please subscribe to her newsletters. And she is a finance and operation developer certified and solution architect certified. Or is the gap. Anita, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, I think I lost your voice in between. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the introduction, Venkatesh. So, thank you everyone for joining in spite of your busy schedule during the weekend. Thus, we have come to an interesting session on bridging the gap. So, usually, when we start on working on any requirement, we will always end up with some clarity. Like, only if you get some clarity, we will be able to can complete the requirement in a better way, in a quality way, manner, correct? So this session would give you an insight how to bridge the gap between the functional consultants and the technical consultants. Please note this is not just to pinpoint the fingers what each side has. This is just a generic view, and then maybe we can then see how to sort out the issues, what to expect from the functional consultant and what to expect from the technical consultant to make the implementation success. Yeah. Can you move to the next slide, please, Venkatesh? Yeah, the disconnect. So first, let us see where the disconnect occurs. So what is disconnect? So obviously there is some communication gap or the lack of description or the details in the FDD or the requirement what is shared by the team. Correct. So how do you manage this? From where it comes? That is what this section speaks. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So here I have listed what are all the focus areas. See, obviously from if you're coming from a functional perspective or from technical perspective, you will have different focus area, right? Me being from the developer side, from the technical architect side, I have jotted down what are all the focus areas, usually what a developer would do. And from the functional perspective, what are all the focus area, what they will have. For instance, if you see from the technical perspective of a developer, we usually focus on the X++, correct? So how do you denorm, how to bring a normalized table, how to create the classes, how to reuse, how to reduce the code redundancy. So all this will be focusing, and obviously that comes with the system performance. So when you deliver something, you should make sure the deliverable should not affect the performance, right? Because if you see in the live system, there are so many processes which will be executing, right? And our code should not affect the performance. So we will make sure the code what we are doing will not affect any impact on the performance. And we will also take care of the data structure and integrity, because since we have the base of OOPS concept, right, object oriented programming concept, so we need to apply all this encapsulation, inheritance, all this in our logic, so that it sticks to data structure and the integrity. So and then how do you integrate with the data system, with the external systems? So anyway, FNO is not a standalone system, so it will be speaking to, it will be communicating to the external system here. And how do you establish the integration without compromising the security or the performance and so on. And also we will also be focusing on the best practices, because when you execute something called as SCAR report, the customization analysis report, there you will see what are all the warnings which you need to follow. So from a developer perspective, we will be seeing we will be having these focus areas. Now, maybe functional. Venkatesh, you can explain, since you are a functional architect here, you will be able to give a better insight on the other side.
Yes, it's rightly said. So, and as a functional, so our focus is more towards the business side. Okay, so what the user is requiring and documenting it and giving that to the developer. So always the gap happens at a communication level. So the requirement is understood maybe a wrong way, or we took it the things. But the main thing while communicating to the technical developer, so it is important for us to document them properly in the FDD. So when you are properly documenting the FDD, that means you are getting the confirmation from the customer also, and he's saying that, okay, the flow is correct and the requirement is captured properly. And the same way, it is going to communicate to the developer. Okay, and make sure your FDD has precise requirements, understanding the use cases and test scenarios to make sure the technical is aware of those. So that is very important. And for the user experience, so all the UI components, if you can give, okay, visualizing that is a difficult for a developer. So make sure, okay, where is the field to be there? Take a proper screenshot, put the field, and if there is a new form to be created, so make sure highlight that part, okay, in the FDD, and then you have to make sure the developer understands it, okay. So that is the main important. And then once the development is done, testing is important, so that we make sure the client satisfaction is met. So this is an interactive session. Feel free to unmute yourself and pitch in if you have any concern or you have any inputs.
Yes. Since this is an open forum, maybe since we are from the different background, being a solution architect or a technical or a functional, please pour your views so that this becomes interactive and we can share our knowledge also.
Yes.
And yes, so here we have highlighted the different focus area from the functional perspective and the technical perspective. Okay, yeah. Can you please move to the next slide?
Sure.
Yeah. So we all have since we are from the different background, we have different priorities and KPIs. So the developers, we mainly focus on the code quality. we always stick to the best practices and where it doesn't affect the performance. And also we should make sure our code should be scalable, right? And avoiding the redundant code and how the duplicate data can be avoided. So that is where we focus on the normalized tables, right? Creating the normalized tables. So all this plays a major role in our priorities. So that is from the developer perspective. And our KPIs will be the system should be stable. So, I mean, the points keep coming, it is repeating. So what is stability? Like there should not be the code, what we deliver should not affect something which is already running. So we should make sure that we do a proper unit testing before we move that or promote to the higher environment. So the system stability and the technicality, it lies on our shoulder. So we should make sure these are all our KPIs and the priorities for functionals. Yeah.
Yeah. For functional side, make sure the business alignment and timelines are met. Okay. So when you have a requirement, so please do communicate. Okay. Whether it is an UAT stage or what level of detailing is required. Okay. So communicate that to the developers. Okay. And timelines. Okay. Whether what stage you are in and all the things you need to communicate to the developer. And our focus was more on the user adoption. Okay. So once the development is done, so we have to make sure that user is understanding the process step by step and getting them aware. Okay. Once they know everything, the efficiency of their process will improve. Okay. So that is our KPI on the functional consultants. So you have to focus towards that area and make sure all the requirements are met and you need to drive the show towards that side. Okay. So make sure this is properly communicated and user adoption is taken care. So those are all our KPIs.
So even in terms of priority, right, Venkatesh? So when it is a
Yes.
priority requirement, so we should make sure the complete requirement, the complete ask is captured in the FBD. See, because at times we tend to lose few major ask in the FDD when it comes to a priority item, because this has to be delivered as a priority. This is a P1 requirement where the user is waiting for this to be delivered. So in such cases, the functional consultant should work with the developer to make him understand the entire process, end-to-end process, so that nothing is missed out when it is delivered. So it should not come as a surprise when we do a testing in the higher environments.
Correct. So it is always recommended to test the thing along with the developer in the dev machine so that the proper communication is done. So see, minimize the changes. So that is where the focus should be on for the functional consultant to deliver that to the end user. So we have to make sure we are minimizing the changes. So to that, test it on a dev machine and make sure that is properly communicated to technical. And once the bug fixes are fixed and all the scenarios in the FDD are tested, then only you have to move to the next UAT stage. So this is a standard recommendation and best practices followed across all the projects. So you have to make sure that process is being followed.
Agree. And even if it is an agile approach, we should make sure that the changes are minimal. Otherwise, it should not lead to the entire rework of the requirement. See, we
Correct.
can test it, but there should not be a major gap. Some minor changes are acceptable, correct? And this is where I see there is a gap between the functional and technical. So when we are testing, we will be thinking, okay, this is already done. But when we test, there we find a major gap. Then otherwise that would lead to rework. So we should avoid repeating the rework here.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So going to the next slide.
Yes, so obviously we will have different communication languages. Venkatesh will be speaking in terms of the user needs and business processes, where he will be explaining the technical and the business process about the business process and what all the user needs the current requirement has. Whereas from the developer perspective, we will be focusing on the implementation, whether we need to extend the existing classes or whether we need to create a new object itself, whether the existing report can be customized to accommodate the current ask, whether it is technically feasible or not, because we will end up with some scenarios where the extensibility is not at all possible. For instance, if you are a developer, you will know, even for the functional, they would know. In Dynamics 365 F&O, we don't have an option to extend or customize all the objects. For instance, if it is an internal or a private classes, private fields, you don't have option to extend it. So in that case, such technical feasibilities, that is how the developers will be focusing on. So what are the implementation, what architecture should we follow? So all this, it will be the developer's language here.
Correct. And the business processes and user needs to be definitely met, because that is where our importance is there. Because who and all we are struggling is to make sure their processes are met. Okay, so make sure all the processes are met. So I can see, I want to ask a couple of questions and see an answer either from Gil or Koti. So what are all the consultants and how the customer challenges are being faced once the development is done? So you can tell me if you are from a functional or technical perspective. So Gil or Koti, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Maybe if you want me to repeat the question, he's asking what are the customer challenges you face after the development is done. So maybe from your experience, if you can share, then maybe we will be able to see, our audience will be able to see how to rectify this. Or even if Koti is from the technical side, you can tell what challenges would you have you faced when there is when there is a change in the ask after the development is completely done. So during such cases, how do you handle this?
Uh, yeah, I'm working as a technical consultant only, Anita and Venkatesh. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, would you
Um,
repeat? Are you functional or
yeah, I'm
technical?
technical,
Okay,
technical only.
then you
Developer
can
in
share
that.
your thoughts. What would happen when there is some development done and then the customer challenges what phase, and if they ask you to do some change again, how do you handle this scenario?
Uh, Actually, I faced one scenario like this only actually. So
Mm,
at that time, customer was not happy with that with our change actually. So
mm,
at that time, so we have re-implemented this whole scenario.
mhm.
Okay.
That was a yeah challenge I did actually.
Correct, correct. That
Yeah,
involves the complete.
yes,
It is a rework, correct, for us
rework.
where you
Yeah, yeah,
need to, yeah, we need to think about the new logic itself, scrapping the old one.
yeah, yes, yes.
Mm,
Yeah, sometimes I face like there is a back gap between the requirement actually. The
mhm,
whole requirement was not satisfied actually.
mm.
So that one again we have to go to we had a discussion with the client and after the deployment it has happened actually.
Oh, yeah, that usually
Um,
happens. So when we move
yes,
to the UAT phase, that time all new ask or such gaps will be identified, right? This is a
yes,
common
yes,
scenario which we face in all the phases here.
yeah. So yeah,
So out
that
of
was
That is
curiosity, Koti, would you do any technical analysis feasibility when a requirement is given to you?
yeah, that is a primary actually primary task developer should do actually before going to the development actually whether it is feasibility or not. That is the first step
Exactly.
developer should do actually. So if that is the feasibility, if it has the feasibility, then only should give then only you should communicate with the functional consultant. Yeah, this requirement is feasible, so we can develop this one. Otherwise we have to tell that tell to the functional consultant straightforward. This is not feasible, and we cannot implement in this system.
Agree. Agree.
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. There
And
should be
at
a
times
communication. Yeah,
requirements do
100%
change
communication
based
should be
on
there. Yeah,
the. Yeah, go ahead, Koti, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's-
So at times, functional people are the blaming persons because requirements do change from the customer as well. And that is where the skill set of functional consultant to handle the customer, make sure the requirement is clear and ask them identify. Okay. So whenever the small example I want to take, okay, when you ask a requirement, so most of the cases we visualize the solution then and there. Okay. So my recommendation to the functional people, don't visualize the solution, listen to the requirement, ask their business challenges, what could be improved by this process, take a detailed note and try to see, okay, understand the scenarios, explain to the customer. So by changing this way, this is the impact in the system. Okay. And visualize towards the reports also. Okay. So what is your report requirements with this functionality? So that way your functional requirements will be more clarified and it will be clear. Hope Koti and Anita agrees with me.
Yes,
Yes.
correct. No, it is not the functional to blame. So even at times there will be a gap when the customer itself communicates to the functional. There will be some confusion. So it is not that the blame is entirely on the functional. So it happens like that. So at times only when more discussion happens, the first discussion itself, you are not going to get the requirement. So in the discussion should be iterative in case where the requirement is complex. So then we will get to know idea of what is to be implemented.
Yeah. So I want to ask Gil a question since she is a solution architect. So Gil, how do you handle these tough customers who is bringing changes like scope creep happening in the projects? How do you handle that? Gil, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Gil, are you with us?
I think there is some problem with her mic, I think, Venkatesh.
Okay. Okay, let's move
Mm.
on. So
Yeah.
one more question for the technical side, which you have raised it on the integration side. Anita, I would really learn to understand what factors do you consider when you are doing any integrations? So as a technical side, what is that you do it? And we want to understand from a functional side, how do you understand a requirement when you take an integration and how should we handle it?
Okay. So I usually get involved in many integration requirement, the discussion. So there are few factors which we primarily need to focus when we get the integration requirement. One is the volume, because based on the volume only you would get to know which integration design you need to do. For instance, if it is a bulk load, then okay, go for DIXF API integration, recurrence integration. So if it is a very minimal load, okay, can you fit with OData? OData supports with the real time, correct? So that we need to identify. So that depends on the data volume. Number one, how frequently the data has to be imported. So that is where it comes, whether it is a real time or I mean it can be asynchronous or asynchronous. So this is number one. So whether the user needs to see the data immediately in the other system as soon as it is created or modified in the source system. So that kind of scenarios we need to identify. So main is this data load and this recurrence. So these two plays a major role in designing the integration, the architecture here. So Koti, have you worked on in the integration where you would have discussed something, right? Have you faced any challenges when you have implemented the integration here?
Uh, Sorry, and unfortunately I didn't involve in integrations actually in my.
Okay.
Uh,
Not a problem. So in future, if you get involved in the
mhm.
integration, maybe these tips you can
Yeah.
keep in mind, and then you can ask such
Mhm.
questions because these are all the base where we decide on the integration scenarios. That forms the base for the design when you do that integration. Not a problem. Anytime we can work on integration.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to understand, Anita, if you can explain us what is the API and what is the DIXF framework. You said 3 4 things you will consider while integration, right? If you can detail explain what it is, so it will be great for the functional people to understand it.
Okay, so DIXF, it is data management framework. So this is the framework where you are going to, which is mainly recommended for handling the bulk load. For instance, it is based on the entities. So let me explain what are the entities. If you take the table, the normalized table, for instance, the customer, it is a normalized table, right? It holds the details of the customer master. For instance, entity can be considered as a denormalized view where it is bringing the data from other related customer tables and creating a denormalized view here. For instance, the customer master holds one set of fields and the address the entity will have the data from address, which will bring the other set of fields. So these will be created as a single entity, and you can see that as a denormalized view. So one thing is it allows all the CRUD operations, that is create, read, update, delete operations can be done via the DMF entities. And since the DMF works on the SSMS, the CQ, this framework, it will be the faster one. Okay, the SSRS framework, it will usually be the faster one, and where it will be created as a batch. So if you see that when you import via the DIXF, then the batch framework comes into picture where the data will be, where the AOS handles the data load by spreading the data across different threads. So this is a concept of DIXF. So obviously DIXF, the entity which you have created for DIXF can also be used for OData. Because how do you see the OData means? OData usually it supports the real time. It is called, you can use it as a real time. For in case of real time integration, few OData entities can be used, but it is not recommended for the bulk load, because once it crosses the 6,000 records window, then we will end up in a throttling, which means that the system will not be able to respond to your queries via OData. This is the concept of OData. So both the OData and the DIXF works on the entities, okay, and depends on which one to use. Base is the where the volume and the recurrence comes into picture here. And I hope that that is clear now. I mean, just the idea of what are the entities and the OData entities and how the DIXF is related here.
Yes, Anand, that is very clear. Thank you for explaining. We'll move on to the next slide. So build first and think later. So why developers should be in the room from day one? So Anita will explain this part.
Yeah. So for instance, rather when the requirement itself is in the discussion, that it is better to bring the developers from the day one here, then we will be able to understand whether the requirements can be met or not. Because there might be a cases of few unrealistic requirements where it cannot be implemented in FNO. Because as you know, because we have many access modifiers where it doesn't allow us to extend, correct? For instance, the private access modifier will not allow you to do any further customization in that particular method or whatever it is, or the class. And for instance, if you want to subside a validation, the standard validation, even that is also not possible in FNO, because that is all possible in AX 2012 or the previous versions of FNO. But in FNO, it is no more possible. The logic comes via the standard framework, and then you can extend the standard framework if it is allowed for extending. And if there are, then at least the developer will be able to comment if there are any issues in the performance. So for instance, if there is a bulk load, when you click on a process, when you say there is an ask for a button, and upon clicking that button, a bulk load of bulk record has to be processed, then the developer can comment, yeah, whether this has to be handled in a real-time manner, or it can be put it in a batch, or try to do it after the business hours. So in that way, the performance, if there are any pitfalls in the performance, then the developer will be able to communicate beforehand. And it is also possible to avoid the redundant work. For instance, the developer would have already done this particular scenario in the earlier model. So here, if there is similar model, then the developer will be able to comment. The technical architect will be able to comment, this is already done. See if it is possible to reuse or if it is possible to extend. So such redundant works can be avoided. And also, as I said in the previous slide, the integration gaps. So when discussing about the integration, after discussing the factors, what are all the load, what is the load, and what is the recurrence, after discussing all this, we need to check whether the data mapping is proper or not. So then that times we will able to understand where the integration gap lies. So these are all few factors which insist that the developer should be involved during the requirement discussion itself, so that later stage we need not rework on the design. So that is where that I am insisting the developer should be in the room from the day one here. Maybe Venkatesh can throw some more light on this.
Yeah. So from the day one, it is at the times it is challenging because requirement gathering sessions usually are being done by functional people, and at times the technical people may not join that. But if they are joining from there to understand the requirement from the customer itself, and that will definitely make a change. Okay, so because they are hearing the requirement themselves, and they are seeing the documentation, and they know the scenarios what it covers. So at times it is also important for a developer to understand the functional process. Okay, at initial stage you will be sticking to the developer, like breaking a code or following a best practice and all, but eventually you will have to learn the functional part. Now, I'm not saying the how to do setup and what is that, but at least at a level of business process, if you are able to understand, so that will make the difference when you're doing any requirements or any development. So this is what I personally recommend. So if you can involve them in the customer sessions, that will make definitely a game changer. So not the whole team, at least the technical team has, I mean, lead or the manager of the technical team, if they are there in this, so the scope creep or the bug fixes and understanding and following the best practices will be told by them, and you will have better requirements and better delivery. Okay,
Yes,
and
I
I
want
want
to
to
add one more point here, Venkatesh. Like you said, right, it
please.
is better for the technicals to understand, to learn something on the base process also, right? That I agree with you, completely agree with you. Because see, we deliver the code, right? And it is when we are doing the unit testing, I usually insist my team not to focus only on that particular piece of code. No, understand the peripheral process from the for the I mean from the system. Okay, make sure that testing what you do, the code what you have incorporated doesn't break the other process. So I usually suggest my team, or even I follow the same. When I do something, at least I make sure the entire end-to-end process is tested, because even the functionals are usually will be busy in the client calls, correct? So every time you cannot ask them, hey, create the data for me, do this complete testing for me. So if it is integration, fine, because integration at times when it is moved to the higher environment only, you will be able to test integration. At times there are scenarios. But if you are able to create the data on your own without the functional help, so that we will be independent and our unit testing will be effective. So I usually recommend this to my team here always.
Yes, I agree. I definitely agree with this. And also, just a point since we have come here. So testing, okay. So test scenarios. So functional people has to write as many scenarios as possible in the FDD. So because from coming from a technical background, they do not understand the business process. So make sure you are guiding them and telling them in the FDDs, okay, these are all the scenarios which I am focusing, to make sure you are also checking that in the unit testing. So this is where you will be able to fix the many of the bugs and requirements. So try to be elaborative in your documentation and give more scenarios, explain those many scenarios, and also perform a negative testing. So this is where many of the requirements have a gap. Okay, so I will tell you one example in one of the development which we have done. So there is a requirement on adding a field in the invoice. Okay, so yes, the invoice is added with a field in a free text invoice in the sales order, and it is working fine with the free text invoice. But the problem is reversing that free text invoice or canceling it. So the system also need to capture that field. So this scenario is very much important for functional to ask with the business, and also the same scenario how it should impact. It should also to be communicated to the team on the technical side. So make sure your scenarios are elaborative and covering all these kind of scenarios. You will have very less changes and happy customers who are happy with the requirements. So visualize this part. So one of the example I want to tell you this one. So visualize it so that your requirements are clear. You have any comments on this, Anita?
Yes, when it comes to testing, it is not only the positive testing, the happy flow testing we need to do. We need to cover the negative scenario, because in the live system, we have many scenarios, right? Usually, see, from the technical perspective, we always do the happy path flow. Okay, my code is done. Okay, this is working. Okay, fine, I am done with it. No, the technical should ask the functional, hey, this is what is there, but what is the negative scenario? What happens if this field is not populated? I am creating a new field here. Okay, even if it is not mandatory, what happens if this is not filled, if this is not populated during this particular logic? What would happen during that? So what would happen during the reversal process? So it is all this, it is also technical responsibility to understand this particular positive and negative cases here.
And blocked sprints. So developers raised blockers during the build that could have been avoided earlier. So like this, see, understand when you're developing, make sure, okay, there are multiple developers working on the same project. Okay. You never know which process is overlapping where. So try to visualize that part. Okay. You don't stick to the module or a place where you're doing. Understand where the data is flowing. So impact also needs to be analyzed. So functional people has to do that part and communicate it. Okay, so this is the change we are doing. So I'm making sure in this module also this is reflecting. And after this, I'm visualizing towards the report. And are you creating a data entity? And are you creating a security privilege for this? So these are all the best practices to follow when you are developing it.
Agree. So this is where the role of technical architect comes. So normally for a team leads or the developers, they would not know the entire process or what is the other side of the process, right, Venkatesh? For instance, if you are saying that this we need to have this requirement, then the technical architect should at least understand, okay, this similar requirement we have already incorporated in the previous sprint. So let us see whether this can be incorporated. So can we reuse it? So in that case, we can avoid such blockers during the build, correct? And always we should make sure from the developer side we are working on the latest code. For instance, code you will know, right? We should always do a get latest every day before we start our task. The reason being, it makes sure the environment is having the latest code and you are working on top of the latest code. Correct? Do you always follow that, Koti? Like getting the latest
Yes,
and
yes,
then yes, yes, because even I
yes,
have
yes,
seen,
that is.
yes, that is one of the main ask here, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So have you faced any such confusion where the other developer had checked in without taking the get latest and which has overridden your change? Have you faced any such challenges in your project? Like, I mean, Koti, I am asking this question to rephrase this question. So have you faced any challenges where other developer had not taken the get latest by mistake and then and it has overridden your changes? Okay, I think Cody has dropped. Okay, let us continue, Venkatesh. Yeah.
Fahar is there. Fahar, if you can feel free to unmute. So we are making it interactive session. If you can let us know you're a technical or functional, we will ask the relevant questions.
Yeah, hi, Venkatesh. So I'm technical, and yeah,
Okay.
I sorry, I just joined late. But I just catch up the things, and yeah, that is a very critical part about working in teams to it's about the practice you are following. So if we made that as a practice to, keep our code sync up maybe on daily basis, it will solve lots of problems we face, at further steps. Uh, One thing I was like, if you guys can highlight, I faced that challenge that we talk a lot about, end user engagements and understanding requirements with them, right? But
Yes.
one thing it seems like missing that usually, businesses have their own current processing or, somehow automation of their processes, right? So
Yes.
the process making or mapping step, right? So it's kind of start fading now, right? Because of these current practices, FDD, FRD, or something like it's too much user sensitive, intensive now, right? Rather than a process mapping thing, because the management usually, already spend their time and money and efforts to set up their business process already. So can you guys please share that how we proceed with us with a client which already have some processes implement other than D365 and now they want to move to D365, right? So what should be the
Yes.
best practice to analyze that? Thank you.
Anita, you can answer and then I'll give my views, please.
Okay, so this is like it is like a greenfield implementation. You are doing the implementation from the scratch, right, Fazal? Like, for
Yeah.
instance, this client is already having a system and now they are planning to use FNO for their implementation. So from the
Exactly.
technical perspective, what I would see how the process is to be like, what are all the process they need to first find fit to FNO. So then analyze what is the next step of whether there is a customization is there or already, because now we have lots of features which is coming which we have in FNO with the regular updates. So then the technical and the functional has to discuss. It is not only the whole and sole responsibility of the functional to understand about the features. So we being the technical, we should also see now we have lots of LinkedIn posts and where we get more updates. So we should keep ourselves updated, and we and the functional and technical can discuss whether this particular ask, this particular fit from the system can be used with this feature in FNO. So that discussion would help us to give a proper fit and make sure, I mean, there will be, I mean, anyway, ask, there will be a customization. We need to make use of standard features like that. So instead of everything going for the customization, make sure the standard features are used and the customization is minimized. And also, how do we do the data upgrade? How do you bring the data to the FNO? So at times, because the source system is different, it will be having a different data model. So how do you map this data model to FNO? Because now then we need to plan bringing the using the DMF templates, right? Because you have templates where you can import the data. So how do you prepare the data like this? So how do you set up the system? So all these discussions would be then giving you a better idea of how to plan, how to start this particular new implementation. Over to
Thank
you,
you.
Venkatesh. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's also important to understand the process, as rightly Anita explained. See, there might be two systems, and everything cannot be apple to apple. So understand the functionalities of D365. Try to give as a standard as much as possible is what I recommend to consultants. Understand what are the functionalities available properly in the module. Give the standard functionality, and even if there is a gap, then you document it according to this flow. I really recommend to use a Visio or a flow chart to make sure what the process is. Okay, that way the business users can relate to it. Okay, they understand the touch points and how the system is flowing, and then make sure that process SOPs are met along with that process, and then you give it to the technical. So that is very much important, because at times when the ERP change or it is a greenfield implementation, so the business processes also change. So during the requirement gathering, many of the times you would have observed the business process change will be discussed and finalized. So that is where their SOPs are cleared and cluttered and they are corrected. So I'm not saying that is the objective, but it is outcome of the ERP implementation. So make sure the new processes is adhered, and for the adaptability of the users, make sure their existing process is also covered in this. Okay, so you don't have to change completely to the new core, and make sure the user is also happy and your documentation is clear to understand what you have taken from them. So this is my recommendation for the functional people.
And also,
Yeah,
one challenge what I usually face is bringing the users out of that old system. So, because the
absolutely.
mindset from the old system, the features, we need to focus on the features what Dynamics has, correct? Not the one the source has. For instance, I have faced a challenge where when we were shifting from Navision to FNO, Navision, it allows us to create the sales line without items, correct? If no, we don't have the possibility. Item is a mandatory field in sales line when you create a sales line. But the ask was Navision allows me. Why it doesn't allow me? Then we took some 2-3 calls to understand, make it understand this is the framework of FNO. So there is no chance. This is one of the mandatory field. Item is a mandatory in the sales line. So such challenges we will face when we completely. It is like uplifting. Like you take the system from the source and then bring it here, and then convincing the user. Okay, this is how FNO work. Check the features. What the latest features what FNO has. This is major challenge where everybody, be it functional or consultant, we will face this.
So adaptability is important. So for them to understand and coming with an open mindset is also very important. To the coming to the new system, listen to the new system, how it is having the options, and then decide how best you can use it to, based on your scenarios is also important. So that's where it is multiple sessions we do as the requirement gathering. We show them the system, and show and tell, show and do sessions we do, so that they do detailed understanding of the system and they get hands-on on the system, and then they adapt it. So adaptability will be a challenge. So that's where we have to be as a functional consultant, make sure they are adapting to the new change and new processes. Whatever is coming from the management is being followed in the new requirement.
Right. Thanks. Great answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So next is non-feasible design. Some designs may rely on functionality that D365 cannot support out of the box. So customizations without technical validation could lead to delays, reviews, and scrap features. Over to you, Anita.
So that is what the point which we bring from the previous slide, why the functional technical has to be involved from day one. So because now we will be promising to the customer, okay, this is possible. Okay, so without understanding the technical feasibility. So then we will bring a design, and when we discuss with the customer, then we would have created the FDD. And then when we discuss with the customer, I mean the developer would say, hey, this is not feasible because here in FNO, in this class, we don't have an option to extend this at all. So there comes a question mark. How do we proceed with this design? Then we need to go on reworking the design. So in such cases, at times we take help from the Microsoft. For instance, if it is a private access modifier, we can use the extensibility request where we need to give the business justification why this particular method or the field has to be enabled, it has to be extended so that this business process would help. So we will be raising a Microsoft extensibility request from LCS. Now it is not LCS, it is from the PPAC. So we will be raising the extensibility request, and it is 50-50 chance. Microsoft might approve that request based on the business justification, but if they feel that this is not a right process, they will also reject it. So in that case, what would happen? We will again come back and we need to end up in a redesign. So my advice is first let us understand whether it is technically feasible or not, and then we will work on the FDD. So that is what I usually discuss with my functional architect when we are designing the requirement.
That so feasibility is very much important before you start the requirement. So that is where the technical capabilities will come. And as a functional, the clear documentation and taking the requirement. So you should be with that skill, understand, keep a listening ear, their challenges, their problems, make sure it is properly documented. So, and one best practices which I would like to say is, so when there is a requirement for increasing the field size in the purchase order, so you have to understand how many places it's going to impact. Okay, it's not just one field, right? Right, Anita? So when you do as a customer technical side, you have to understand what is that customization is impacting. Okay, it's not just a good idea just to increase it at one place, right?
Yes. See, for instance, the requirement might look simple. Hey, go and increase the string size of this one. It is from 50, I want it to 600, 500. Okay, but the requirement seems to be simple. But being a functional or technical, they need to understand where and all this particular field is referred and what all the impacts does it have. Obviously, the increasing the field doesn't have impact, but we need to see how many records are using this. So if it is a minimum number of records, let us convince the customers, hey, this is not needed because unnecessarily it will take up the space. So in case in future, it might have, if you have a multiple rollouts, it might have some impact in the performance also because performance holds the key here. So that we need to do some background study, and then we need to understand whether that is a simple requirement or the requirement which is not advised at all. Though it is feasible, but it is not advisable. That is what we usually do.
Correct. So I want to rely on the scalability and the performance. Okay. Solutions that won't scale or perform. Okay. So you have built a very good solution. Okay. Whether that is really required by the customer or not. Okay. Understand that also. Okay. You have given it, you have thought about the requirement, you have given full functionality. That report is also being generated from this data. So you also, as a functional solutional architect, so I recommend for you to understand whether this is really good to have feature or it is really required by the business. So, and then based on that, so you have to do the development. Okay. Ignoring the data volume and batch processing. So how huge is your data? Okay. When you are doing some customization on the sales order. Okay. So whether when you are opening the form, how much time it will take you to open. Okay. And if there is an integration, so how much time it is taking to fetch the data. Okay, so how is that you are taking care while doing this? And there are batch processing options. So schedule all your batches during the offline time so that there is no impact on the business. So make sure the system is performing well, and do the optimization on the database and scale the required technical insights like insights on entities, catching, async jobs. So this will be updated purely by Anita. So you can go ahead, Anita.
Yes. Yeah. For instance, there is an integration ask where you are importing the sales orders. Okay. And I mean, sales orders invoice, any type of invoice you are importing. So it is not necessary you need to post it immediately, correct? You have an option of batch processing where you can do the posting of invoice in the later stage also. So because if you write a separate logic of, see, as soon as you import, you immediately post. So
Correct.
that would obviously have some, see now for single entity or in your VM, it would work. But when you promote to UAT or pre-prod or production, where you have all the live processes running, this immediate import and immediate post would have impact on the other performance also. So we need to ensure, okay, whether we can post this one as a recurrence. I mean, can you schedule this particular posting batch job after business hours, or is it needed or not? Is it immediately needed? So based on these studies, we would know whether such requirements, how do you design these requirements? So this one usually I would recommend. And for such heavy load scenarios, I would recommend after the business hours so that the other users, other processes are not affected. Because when you are posting now, and this might slow down the system, slow down the process which other users are using, and it will end up in a deadlock. So this one I have seen this in many of my projects where now of late we will be able to at least see where the blocking or the system is crashing. So right, so this would lead to all the system crashing. Also making use of the entities. So for instance, if you are using bulk load, as I said already, check whether it is a DIXF can be used or the OData entity can be used. Whether you need to bring it to a staging table or you can directly push it to the table. Or after your process are all over, make sure you clean up the new, wherever you have kept the staging table, right? Make sure you clean up so that the database size do not keep on growing. Of late, we have so many cleanup jobs, correct? So make sure you utilize them, and so that the unnecessary data do not get piled up in the database. Yes. So I hope this is what we follow in all the process, in all our projects, right, Venkatesh? Cleaning up jobs, that plays a maybe, because we have a separate Microsoft link itself where they have listed all the cleanup jobs. So that shows the importance why the cleanup jobs plays a role here.
Yes, it is very important. See, these are all the best practices. Nowhere you get any documentation on what to follow. So this comes with adaptability, and after getting some level of experience at solution architect level, these are all things you will understand. Okay, but this is what we are doing for you to understand when you're starting the career, to make sure these are all things you are following and these best practices are followed, so that you'll have a good implementations. So the next topic is good way to explain business process. So we're going to come on write better user requirements. So clear, specific, actionable requirements reduce confusion and rework for developers. So this is important for the documentation. So everywhere you will see the documentation gaps, how you are maintaining. I know it's not that consultant doesn't want to do. As a timeline, there's a challenge for you to do. So I recommend as much as possible, at least visualize those scenarios and test it. So your testing is the key for the requirement, and use real entities, table forms, and business processes to make requirements relevant. Okay. So for example, when you're doing a functionality, understand the entity creation is also important. Nowadays, all the reports are being handled in Power BI. Okay. So you no need to work on an SSRS report and think of it. So think from the perspective, if you can add this part to the Power BI and make sure the entity is created and you understand how the entity data is flowed to the BI. So earlier, the Power BI has a challenge on taking the data warehousing and all. Now Fabric is using Azure Synapse, which can take the data immediately, and the performance is very good. So make sure when you're developing it, so data entities are also developed, and understand the vague statements. Okay, just don't write add a report or create a workflow. So when you write a report, make sure you are attaching that Excel report which you have got from the business, and make sure you are giving the workflow process. So you need how the levels and what all the things you need to be done for the workflow. So this is also important for you when you're doing documentation, and include the functional context, data points, and triggering conditions. So like vague, we need a vendor approval workflow that doesn't work. So when do you need it? At what time I have to enable this button? And what validations I have to see before I am clicking to submit the workflow. So understand that side and tell these insights to the technical people. So how do we do better? Okay. So understand where you are developing this workflow on the vendor table when the new vendor record is created or when the bank account details are changed. Approval should route based on the vendor group. So this is the kind of scenario. So you should detailedly write it so that the technical team understands it. Over to you, Anita.
Yes, yes, I agree. See, even in case of the entities which you asked us to develop, it is not necessary only for the Power BI or the Fabric integration. For instance, you are creating a new field in the table, and you make sure it is added to the entity. The reason being, if you want to bulk load, upload the data for any other rollout, or if you want to move the data from one environment to another environment. So this new field, if it is kept in the entity, that would help you there that time. So obviously, as Venkatesh said, it would also be helpful when you generate a report using that particular field when you use it in the Power BI or the Fabric. So these are all the very minor things which we usually take. And obviously, whenever you create any new form or any new table, you can leave it. If you're creating a new form or some process, make sure it is added to it is having a particular it is having a security artifact. For instance, creating a new privilege, because not all the users will have full access to that particular form, and few might need read access or few might need the delete access. So you need to segregate how to create the privilege and the duty, whether a new role is necessary. I would recommend not to create a new role for all the new forms, whatever the artifacts you are creating. If you create a privilege and duty, now you have an option to attach it from the security configuration, right? So that you can make use of it. So these are all, even if at times functional overlooks it, it is developer's responsibility to make sure the entity and the security artifacts are created. So every time you don't need to keep depending on the functional consultant, hey, this is not specified in the FDD, so that is the reason I have not done. No, it is our responsibility to also check what's been overlooked here.
Correct. It is very much important for properly understanding the things.
Yes,
So
Fahad,
like,
you have some question here.
Yeah, Anita. So you raised about the security context here. So like it's responsibility for both and technical, I agreed. But in which document that security implementation will goes on? Should be the part of the FDD, or that will be, then a final technical implementation document.
Usually, see, FDD will be shared with the users, correct, Faisal? So that functional has to capture this in the FDD so that the users will know these are all the roles which should need access to this particular form or new form, whatever you have created. But as a part of technical reference, see, you are not the only developer going to use this, correct? We need to pass this for future reference. If somebody needs to understand what this particular development is about, your TDD or IDD should reflect whatever the technical artifacts you have created as a part of this particular development, correct? So even in the TDD or IDD, you need to make sure this security are captured, the security, what privilege you have created, whether it is a maintain privilege or a role or the view privilege, or what is the role affected. So all this, if you capture, that would help for a future reference. So better documentation, better clarity.
Thank you.
so very true. And see, for sure, you will be creating a privilege, right? So whether as a functional, if there are needed for multiple roles or not, they need to mention in the FDD. And usually you will create one privilege or a role for the form if it is a newly customized. So for that, based on the requirement, you should document, okay, I need more privileges, or I with one privilege, I will be able to manage. So the security item is also important to consider. So which is, I've seen the documentation, many of them doesn't do that. So this is a very good question which since you have asked. So yes, you need to consider those things also when you're documenting as a functional. And the technical, when developing it, for sure, they need to ask this question: do you need any privileges, or the standard privilege if I give, you'll be able to manage in the security side.
Yep, thank you.
Welcome. So moving on to the system. So we have one use case. This is a customer, all customer
Credit
screen
rating.
in the Dynamics. Yeah.
Mm.
So there is a form information available in Dynamics. So Anita, can you take us through what is the technical details available on this for a functional
Yes.
person to understand, and how does the architecture of Dynamics work? So what is the form, what is the table, and if you can explain to us, that will be great.
Okay. So for instance, if the functional needs to understand whether this table from where, what is the table field which is referred here. So every time he don't need to depend on the developer. So here the quick reference is already available. So if you are familiar, for instance, if a functional needs to take what is the, how do I get the field related to this credit rating? It is not a rocket science here. So if you go to this particular field in the form, right click on it, you will be able to get this form information. So upon clicking the form information, you would get the name of the form. So below that is the control name. So that is little bit technical for you, Venkatesh. Control name is in the form level in the AOT, how this control is named. So that is a control name that you don't need to worry. So if you click on the form name, which I've highlighted, it would open something called as form information there. So in the form information, if you expand the administration tab, so in the administration tab lies the technical details for quick reference for the functional. If you see what is the data source here and what is the associated field but for that particular form control. So in that, in some cases where the functional needs to understand a bit technical about this field, then this will be very handy. On top of that, we also have the table browser, right? So table browser, for if you have in the higher environments, like unlike AX 2012, you can open to go to AOT and you open the table browser, because everybody has access, if be it functional or technical client, whoever, they have access to table browser. But in FNO, you don't have an option of table browser. So in that case, you have a table browser which is accessible till the pre-prod environment. For the prod environment, you don't have, but you will be able to view the data from using the table browser. So via that also you can, the developed functionals can see how the data is mapped to that particular field. So here, as you know, if you navigate to the form via these steps, you will be able to land it or get the details about that particular data field here. And obviously, if there is a display method, you know what is display method, right? That is not a physical field. There are some cases where via some manipulated calculations, the field will be populated in the form. We call it as a display method there. So in case of display method, instead of data field, the data method will be displayed. So in that case, you cannot see the data in your table browser. So these are all the very minor technicalities which would help the functional to understand without taking the help from the developer.
Okay. So table browser is very handy. So use it, open the details and see how the functional side you are. It is very much required for you to understand the table level structure and how the data stores in the Dynamics. So if you use the table browser, you will get understanding how these all things are being maintained, what forms, what tables. So what is the impact on the technical side? You will get more understanding there. So I recommend everyone to use the table browser and see.
Yes, please note the table browser doesn't allow the update or the delete operation. Anybody who has, even if you are a system administrator, you will only be able to read the data. You can view the data, but it doesn't allow you to modify the data or delete the data. So it is a safe way to see the data. Anybody can access it. For the functional, if you have a system admin access, you will be able to go access the table browser URL. It is just a URL which is appended with the table browser keyword. So if you use that, you will be able to view the data, and it is like you don't need to worry whether the data is being edited or updated or deleted. There is no worry on that.
Thank you, Anita, for the tip. And use D365 module. So some of the examples we want to give. So requirement become clearer when tied to existing standard modules. So, okay. So try to relate most of the standard process and make sure you are able to give a workaround solution. So don't always try to develop something which is really not required. And some of the specific modules like sales and marketing, AR, GL. So they are data which is flowing. For example, when you create a lead or prospect in the sales and marketing module, it goes till the customer creation in the AR. And when you do a sales order, the entry gets posted and there is a GL impact. So understand the structure, how Dynamics works between the modules, because since you are using a bigger system like F&O and all, so there are uh, integrations within the modules and data flowing within the modules. Understand that process. Maybe you're a functional side of SCM or a tech or finance. Okay, so understand the impact on other modules also while you're developing something. So okay, customer asks something, so I don't have to develop something directly. Okay, make sure their process from sales and marketing on the other side is also being handled with this. So nowadays you might have CRMs, okay, for handling the sales and marketing module. So how the data is coming from there? We don't have to create some prospect process in Dynamics if there is a functionality already available in the CRM system. So what is the solution architecture? What are all the products are there? Keep that in view, and where the touch points are there for the users, make sure you are using it, and then you're not developing the same process which is there in the other system. So that is where a functional solution architect has to think and understand the process. So state if the functionality needs to be added to an existing form or a new form or a report is needed. So this is on the documentation side. There's always a gap. We don't mention that, okay, this is required in that form also. Okay, we visualize only to stick to one place and we develop it and leave it. And when you go for a UAT, you get that feedback. Okay, see, this is not flowing. Okay, from the sales and marketing, it is not flowing to the till end. So the flow is taken care from that. Okay, example, we'll give you the sales order module. So add a button on the sales table to fetch credit limit status, block the credit order, block the order if the credit is exceeded. So in this case, you have to visualize where and all the impact is going. There is also a credit and collections module which will block this. Okay, and how is the release being happened? Okay, in case of cancellation, how do you give the credit back to the system? So this is all that you have to visualize when you're developing something. So show only what is needed. Show not only what is needed, but where and how it aligns with the standard architecture. So where and all impact is done, so that you need to communicate to the technical side. So you have anything, Anita, on this?
Yes, agree. So like I would also like to add one more point, like if you show some example which is already in the standard, for instance, hey, I want it, the requirement is to create a new wizard. Okay, so maybe it is for a junior developer, it might be little bit tricky how to build the logic for creating a new wizard. Okay, then the functional can help. Hey, this such wizard creation is already existing in so and so module. Go to this module. Okay, you can do a screen sharing session. Go to this module, click this, and this is how the wizard should open, and see how the validations are being done. Similar validation I wanted for this particular process also. So at the end, if you click finish, what should happen? So if you try to showcase something which is already existing in the standard, then we will have a better clarity of bringing our code there. So this I also usually recommend to my functional also. Show something which is already existing in the standard. So in that way, we can easily map what is to be done so that we don't miss anything here.
Correct.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next slide. So agile user stories and outcomes. So translate your business needs to developer ready tasks. So, okay, when the business user asks you something, so that is where a functional consultant efficiency will come. We should talk to the technical in their language, bridge the gap. That is what our role is. So as an AP clerk, I want to upload vendor invoices via Excel in the vendor invoice journal so that I can avoid manual data entry and reduce the posting errors. So in this, make sure in this requirement, you are mentioning who needs it. Okay. So which is the role needed this option and what they need. Make sure that is addressed in your documentation, why it matters. So what is the business value we are bringing by changing this process? So this is what you have to understand. And can I do any automation in this process? So visualize that part also. Wherever the manual tasks, if I can avoid that, we have to avoid and make sure that is being handled. So faster invoice processing, fewer errors, higher adoption. So if you follow that detailing these three questions before you do any FTD, submit to the technical, answer this: who needs it, what they need, and why it matters. So this is important with your documentation. If the three things are being handled in the document, then you are good to give it to the technical. So this way you will do in a better way. So Anita, you want to explain on the
Yes.
developer side?
Yes, correct. So when such details are shared, Venkatesh, then it becomes easy for the developer to estimate the effort. So how complex it is, whether it is feasible or not. So if you share this, okay, should I extend the a custom a standard entity or should I create a new entity for this? So how is it going to be handled? And what is the level of complexity, whether it's a simple or medium or complex? So then we can share the effort estimate. So with all these details, with all these main points, we will be able to estimate and then get a clear picture of completing this requirement here.
Correct. So you want to touch point on the Excel integration framework, how it works?
Yeah, Excel integration framework here for every form you will have seen on the top right of the form you have an Excel integration. See, you can also import the data via the DIXF framework using the Excel format. For instance, you have the source data format as Excel. You will be able to import the data if the entity is already existing. You will be able to import the data using the DIXF in the Excel format if your data is in the Excel. So there is also option, also you can export the data via DIXF in the Excel format. So it depends on what type of source data format you are choosing in the export or import data project. Additionally, if you want to export the data from the form, okay, so you have an option on the top right where you can click that and it will give you a list of entities where the user can select that and that will export to an Excel. So in one of my blog posts, I have given how to enable the Office add-ins to enable this Excel framework, Excel add-in framework. So if you get time, please go through it so that, see, by default, this Office add-in will not be enabled in our system. You need to do some steps, preliminary steps to enable it. So which I have listed in my blog, and the blog details, the blog, which blog is there, I have already shared in the initial slide also. You can go it. And using this Excel framework, you will be able to edit or create or delete the data from that particular form. So it is all the underlying framework is the data entity. So if you have the data entity where the root data source is the header, then for that form, the Excel add-in will be by default enabled. You don't need to create a separate Excel data entity for it. I hope this gives you a high level idea of how this Excel integration will be working.
Yes, of course it is. And thank you, Anita. So functionally, see, many of the requirements were good to have. So that is where you have to see, okay, really it is giving you impact on the process and it is adding value. So if not, just propose a workaround and go ahead. So that is where my standard recommendation is there, because if you do development, it is also needs maintenance, and every release you have to make sure all your developments are tested and you go to the next phase. So this is my recommendation for the functional people. And for technical people, Anita, I'd like to ask one question. How complex it is on effort estimates, whether a standard entity can be extended?
See, that depends, Venkatesh. For instance, it is just adding 2, 3 fields and you don't need to perform some complex manipulation in that field. Then it is a simple effort. But there are cases where you need to do some calculation in that field and you need to refer it. When you import it, you need to have some validations, and when you export it, then you need to do some calculation depending on the few fields which are dependent on these fields. So that depends. So based on the ask, whatever the in the FDD we have, the effort varies. But if it is a simple task of adding a field over, like how for every new field what we create, we'll be extending the standard entity, right, which doesn't take much effort. But if you want to create the entity from the scratch, where it involves so many tables, as I said already, the data entity is a denormalized view where many tables are involved. So in that case, the effort will be a bit complex.
Got it. So moving on for the tools for collaborations. So there are multiple tools for the project which you need to use. Azure DevOps is one of the important for project management, which is recommended by Microsoft best practices. So it needs to be used both by technical and functional side. So you need to understand how the Azure DevOps framework works, add all your tasks and requirements, and you can put the bugs. And I believe everyone uses this framework for deploying their codes. So the change sets are also being tracked. So this will have a clear picture on the project. So many project managers and functional consultants use this part. And LCS is one of the important thing for a project. So lifecycle services from Microsoft. So it is being used for managing your environments and complete project on the uh, server side and all. Along with that, now some of the features were earlier in LCS moved to Power Platform Admin Center. So you need to use both the systems to manage now. And SharePoint or OneNote is one of the documentation which you need to use on day-to-day basis so that it can push the data and bring it. For example, SharePoint integration, I want to highlight one scenario. So there is many requirements which says that the attachment which is done on a form needs to be given for email when they need a approval for it. For example, you created a purchase order and there are certain documents which were there attached. So understand the framework, okay? Whenever you attach the file, it is stored in a SharePoint server. And when you are writing a code using a Power Automate or a custom code, triggering the email alert, make sure it is going there and you are giving the attachment link through SharePoint. So this is one of the important scenarios to understand the requirements. So understand the tools of Microsoft, how the ecosystem is built, and that way you will have a better understanding. You have anything on this, Anita?
Yes. Yes. So Azure DevOps, as Venkatesh rightly pointed out, it is not only used only for the functional to just to get the requirements. So it has to be used by both technical and the functional because it is easy to go and track what is being asked. Say every time rather than asking the functional, hey, what is this requirement? What is that I am not clear? The FDD, what is which carries the entire requirement, it will be against that particular work item in the DevOps. So if you go and see that work item, it will get you all the details, how complex, what is the priority of that, what is the effort which has been already estimated for it, and then whether it is in progress, and make sure that particular how the DevOps is being used. It is not only like once it is released or once the code is complete or when it is moved to the UAT, make sure the status of that particular work item is also changed so that it is efficient for tracking. So otherwise, if you don't update that status, right, if you take a report, the DevOps item will still be in either in the in progress state or whether it's a completed state. So that and all, it will be, we need to make sure that it is updated as and when we move to different environments. So that is also a responsibility of the technical to make sure the DevOps is used properly. On top of it, the SharePoint integration. See, we already have the SharePoint integration out of box. So how the SharePoint is integrated, how when you upload or down, when you upload the attachment to and from the SharePoint to FNO or FNO, to FNO or from FNO, how to make use of this out of box SharePoint integration, that we can also explore. On top of it, how do you export the attachments? For instance, if you restore the environment from one environment to other environment, when you refresh the database, the attachments are not transferred. So how do you manage it? So all this you need to capture when you do it, when you do it technically. So otherwise you ask the question to the functional, hey, when you do a data refresh, database refresh, okay, we will be losing all these attachments. So in that case, what should we do? Whether we need to store it, give a particular link in the against each record so that the user can go and check whether that link is carrying that document or not. So such discussions would have the, it is like a brainstorming. You need to say this is what we can propose and this is what we can implement, which is feasible or not. So we should make use of this particular tools, these tools what we have, to give the implementation a success here.
Correct. So coming to the next topic, so not my problem mindset. Okay, so initially even Anita and me would have faced those same scenarios. Okay, we say, okay, this is not the functional issue, this is not the technical issue. So come out of that mindset. Don't blame anyone. Okay, understand how do we fix this. Okay, what is the issue? How do we fix it? So developers blame unclear specifications for sure. If the specifications on the requirements are not properly documented, they will blame here. And consultants blame poor delivery, saying that your unit testing was not done properly and your requirement understanding was not clear. So example, if a consultant raises a ticket button not working, then developer says no reproducible steps. So you will have to reproduce this issue in a dev machine. Only then they'll be able to fix it. So it should be reproducible. So understand that it needs to be reproducible. And developer changes a form layout. Consultant says not clear, but gave no UI input earlier. So if you are not giving the UI input, so developer will put that button anywhere in the form. So make sure you are giving the specific screenshot and address where you need the button. Visualize it before you do the documentation.
And this is where the technical architect comes into role, correct? They need to identify. See, now we have lots of documentation which Microsoft is publishing and updating, right? So we need to at least understand what are all the peripheral areas. You don't need to deep dive into all the functional process. Okay, understand, okay, this is what is happening in this particular feature. Okay, what does it do? Just a high level understanding of each process for the technical architect would be able to identify if there is anything gap we have in the FDD. See, even function, everybody makes mistakes, correct? It is not that you cannot expect 100% documentation, a proper steps in the FDD. So it is a role of the technical architect also to tell, hey, this might be a gap. Should we work on it? And one more point, it is working in my environment. It is not working in the other environment. So this is a common statement what our developers say. Your code, your VM is not being used by the users. So it is a different, the code is getting promoted to the higher environment. So it is your responsibility doesn't get over if the code is working in your VM. No, it has to work in all the VMs, in all the environments when your code is promoted. But for that, we need to make sure you have the proper data in your VM, the proper configuration. For instance, if your data is outdated, then even and if there is some data change in the higher environments, so you will have a different result in while testing in VM, and there will be a different result when you test in the higher environment. So we should make sure your data is updated, up to date in your VM, so that such iterative testing between to and fro, functional and technical, it is not replicated in my VM, it is not working in the test environment, this can be avoided.
Correct. So you are absolutely at the mark. So what are the consequences of this mindset? Okay. So delays due to repeated clarification groups. So understand, guys. So you are battling the things with time. So project go live will not wait. So how fixes are being done faster is important. So example, developer implements posting logic without validation. Consultant logs bugs for missing rules. So this is an example. Make sure this is not going in loops. Okay, your user scenarios are specifically designed, and when you find a bug, it should be able to fix it in a short span of time. So make sure you're following the best practices. And loss of accountability. So don't do the blame game. It's always says, okay, it's okay, fine, you are blaming the functional or you're blaming technical, and how do we fix it is important than blaming. So accountability is also important. So both the team together only has to find the solution and fix it. So example, bug not found in UAT. Okay, developer test cases weren't shared. So consultant says, okay, I expect and assume basics to be covered. This is what is important. The gap, okay, developer knows the system side, how to develop, write a code. Consultant needs to communicate on the functional side. So these are all the functionality impact from the flow side. Give the flow detailed visual diagram in the document. Explain to them. Make sure they are understanding this and developing it. So developer side also should understand why there is a gap. Okay, it's not just that the requirement has come again to rework. No. So there is some scenarios which were missed during the documentation. You need to fix it up and make sure the process is running smooth and good. So at times these are handled during the post go live and things, but whatever the rework is coming, so these needs to be handled.
Yes, I think Fahar has something to share. Yes, Fahar, please.
Yeah. So I would like to add here one thing that, usually, it is a debate about the test cases. So I think it is a shared responsibility between developer and the functional consultant to discuss and decide the test cases, right?
Yes.
So even we should have a kind of, a subtask that, uh, it need to be unit tested by both in the dev machine, so it will not, you know, become a surprise in the hiring environment. Thank you.
Agree. And that
True.
is the
And also
reason we
it
are
is also
uploading
important.
the unit test cases, correct? So that document we need to create. And anyway, you don't spend much time to create a UTC, right? You can make use of that this one, and then you can create a simple UTC where it shows this is what the process is and this is what the result is. So unit test case document is one of the document which it is developer's responsibility to make sure it has to be delivered and covered all the process. Sorry, Venkatesh, I interrupted you. Yeah.
No problem. So I just want to clarify, it is also important for functional people to test it on the higher environment. So how many times have the testing done on the unit testing at the dev machine and also on the UAT? Because there are multiple people working on the same project, right? There might be some impact coming from different module or different system, right? So that is also important to make sure you use the tools for testing, and automation testings are there right now. You can use Power Automate to do the flow, test it, and then make sure your processes impact with every release. Okay, so that is also important. So unit testing with the developer is also right important, but on the same thing at UAT level, testing with multiple code change sets is also important for a functional.
Agree. And also when you are testing in the higher environments, we need to make sure where if you have any integration enabled, we need to make sure the code when it is promoted to higher environment where the integration is enabled, there also it is tested. For instance, if you enable the dual write in your environment, Venkatesh, so not all the data import process would work smooth. I have faced in many of my projects where the code is working standalone in the dev environment or the higher environments where the dual write is not enabled. But when we move that promote the changes to the environment, such environments, we see that the process is not working. Then upon saying, okay, when we disable that, then how do I usually do? The first question I ask whether any integration is enabled. For instance, dual write. Okay, would you please pause the dual write for a moment and see whether this particular process is working? Yes, that works. Then we need to identify how do we manage this. So we need to make sure unit testing is fine, but promoting to a higher environment and testing there where the integration is enabled, that is also needed because that should not come as a surprise when we move to production pre-prod environment where you do a complete end-to-end process testing.
It is also very much important. So replacing with collaboration, everyone owns part of the problem and the solution. So understand what is that on a functional side to be done, where is the change, modify your document, share it back, and whatever the bugs you have identified, give it a proper documentation on that. And those bugs understand from technical side and needs to be fixed. So joint requirement walks through help uncover assumptions early. So if the requirement is taken together and there is a technical team from the starting stage itself, then it will ease the process because they also understand, okay, this is from coming from the customer. This part we have not clarified. Okay, this scenario we have not considered. So that is important. So examples, if you see consultant tags developer in work item with expected outcome, developer adds a notes on feasibility, right? So when you are confirming a requirement, feasibility check has to be given before you start the thing. Okay, and you should communicate the challenges. This is possible, this is not possible. So that is where the gap has come.
Agree. Like it is not necessary functional has to remind the developer for every change made in the FDD, right? So that is where the this collaboration tools comes into picture. For instance, he is uploading the latest FDD. See, he might be busy in the calls. It is not necessary he has to get onto a call with the developer to make him understand a minor change what he has made to the FDD, correct? So major change is fine. You need to get into a call and then sort it out. But if there is any change, minor change in the FTD, he would have uploaded to against the work item, the DevOps work item. And if the developer is tagged, the developer would automatically get a mail alert that there is some change made in that particular document. So then it is not again the blame game doesn't come into picture. Hey, you have not told me this requirement, but I haven't implemented. So it is developer's responsibility also to make sure the work item is the alert from the work item is checked frequently and then modify the change accordingly here. So it is at the end, we are all a team, right, to make this implementation successful rather than playing a blame game. So for the user, we are a team who is going to deliver this project successfully. So that is where the functional and the technical collaboration is important here.
So that's where the tool like DevOps is very much handy. So how do you write it? You can comment it on the task and create a bug. So and the check that and you fix it up. So that is where these kind of tools like project management tools like DevOps is very much handling. handy for the users. So that's why we recommend to use the DevOps for your implementations. So replacing with collaboration. So power of shared testing. So don't do the testing on your own. Okay, try to involve. Okay, both the team. If you are sitting together and do the testing in the dev machine itself, you would solve 90% of the problems. So developer observing gaps while testing together will be handled by the functional. And when there is stronger partnership together, there are very less rework and the outcomes will be far better. So it is also recommended to do the unit testing by the developer in the dev machines. Both functional and technical do the testing after that. So then your outcome is clear and specific. Then move that change set to UAT. So you'll have very less changes after doing this process. So this is what our recommendation is.
Agree. So to make this testing more easier, just to reiterate, we need to make sure we have the proper data in our dev VM. So because if the data is not updated and if there is any configuration change in the higher environments which is not reflected in your dev VMs, then again the testing would give you a different result. Okay, and also that the when you make sure this is the way, this is one of the chance for we developers to learn this process. So it is not that you are only going to test the code snippet. No, get understand that okay, this is how the entire process works. So this is how I learned the functionality in F1O. They give me one process to do the customization, okay, but I understand the entire process. So in that case, I am not completely dependent on a functional. I don't need to wait for the functional to come and test the entire process and then find a flaw and then find a fix it. No, at least to some level I will be able to unit test my process so something is not broken. So I get this detail from the functional, be it a positive test case, positive scenario or negative scenario. At least see, if you have 10 scenarios, not all the 10 scenarios can be tested by we technicals. Okay, at least I take account of 5 or 6 scenarios or 4 or 5 scenarios. Okay, at least this is testing, this is important for scenarios, positive and negative, I test it. Okay, so this seems to be good. So rest of the scenarios with the functional collaboration, then we will be able to do a complete testing here.
Perfect. So which data plays a role, Anita? So basic configurations, whatever is required by technical and needs to be configured by functional, right? So
Yes.
how does the testing impact with the data?
Okay. One moment, Venkatesh. I think Fahir has a doubt here. I mean, he
Yes,
has
please.
raised his hand. Yes, please, Fahir. Yeah.
No doubt. But I just like to add another thing here that sometimes the dev environments are behind to the higher environments in terms of data and everything. So there is a possibility, there is an option that we can remote debugging to the higher environment, right? We should utilize that as well if needed. Yeah, that's
Yes,
it.
that is
Thank
a
you.
very good point. Yeah, because on one thing is, see, even in my blog post, I have written how to configure the connecting the database to the higher environment. But only thing when we debug, as you said, we can debug after the business hours or when the team is not using. So that is number one. Because when you debug, then they will not be, they will have some performance impact in their in that particular environment where
Correct.
you have connected the data. So it is a very good idea rather than waiting because restore takes 8 hours, correct? So rather than waiting, if it is a backpack file, it would take 8 hours to get to a dev VM. So rather than waiting, we can easily connect to the higher environment to their database and we can start the debugging by informing everybody here. Coming to Venkatesh question, so if the data is not updated, Venkatesh, for instance, here you have configured some, you have enabled some feature in the higher environment, which is having impact in the requirement what you have drafted. And if that is not enabled, and based on that feature, you have also set up some data in some of the forms. Okay, and that is if that is not reflected in this dev VM, then our testing would not get a better result. It would always say, okay, this is not working. My code is there, but that is not working because this configuration is not enabled. So we need to make sure, at least not the latest data, we make a practice that every 20 days, the data will be restored from the production environment to the, I mean, to the tier 2 environments. From there, we make sure it is flowed to the dev VMs. So in that case, we make sure the data is up to date. So this also saves the time of both functional and technical here.
Correct. It's also very important to understand. Okay, I'm a functional. I only think about business. No, please understand the technical side also. And when you are talking to them, try to give them in their language. So that way you'll have better communication. Okay. From the same to the technical people also. So when you are saying it technically not feasible, understand that and give them a clear identification to the functional people, explain them, see, this is the table and this is the framework we have. This is why this is not been able to possible. So these details, if you communicate, it will have better requirements and better communication. So always understand from their other person's shoes to make sure you are giving the right thing.
Agree. Like how functionals are going to, if they give a walkthrough of how this is working in the standard forms, similarly, we want in the current requirement. Similarly, technicals also should understand why it is not feasible. See, this is the method where it is, you will not be able to extend further. Maybe we can raise a Microsoft ticket to get if it is extension is possible or not. Yeah, otherwise, hey, this field is only allowed for read only. You will not be able to update or delete that. I mean, you cannot update or do something on that field. So such things, when you discuss technically, at least a minimum technical information, if we share it with our functional, even they will be able to understand, okay, this is where the issue is. So they will also apply the same in the further requirement gathering there.
So we will quickly take any questions if you guys have. Feel free to unmute and ask us.
I think this session was more interactive session where we shared our thoughts. Fahad was more sharing his thoughts with the experience what he has got. Thank you, Fahad.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
much.
guys. You are amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for making this session more useful and interactive, informative, Fahad. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. So we would like to come up with the next topic, which is happening on 4th of May. So that is balancing the best practices and customer demands, tackling excessive customizations in Dynamics 365 projects. So this is being handled by me, and along with me, Biluru from Germany will be joining us. She is an MVP. And please use the QR code to scan and register for the event. So we'll also be sharing this on all our social media. Please do join us in our next session.
Another interesting
Thank
session
you
is
so
on.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the weekend learning, Venkatesh.
Thanks, Anita. Thanks for joining us over the weekend and giving a time for our community. It really
Yeah.
appreciates us. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks to our audience too. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Fahad. Thank you, Priyanka. Maybe I think you have joined bit late, but I think you should be able to get the access to the once Venkatesh uploads this one, the recording. I think you will be able to get an idea of what the discussion was about. Thanks a lot for joining, Priyanka.
Thank you, guys. So
Thank
precious.
you. Have a good weekend. Yeah. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.